For years, my daughter and I lived in the same house like strangers, one silent wound at a time. But one cracked window, a spilled soda, and a note she didn't throw away changed everything. I think the last time my daughter hugged me without flinching, she was 11. It wasn't a special moment. We were in line at Target. She wrapped her arms around my waist while we waited for the cashier. No warning. No reason. Just instinct. Now she's 15. And she barely speaks to me unless she's asking for a charger. I wish I could say there was a single moment when things changed. A dramatic fight. A slammed door. But there wasn't. She just drifted. One sarcastic comment at a time. One forced smile. One "I'm fine" that never really was. I used to know everything: what she liked to draw, her favorite cereal, what made her giggle until she cried. Now I barely know what music she listens to. She gets home, disappears into her room, headphones on. If I knock, she rolls her eyes. If I don't, I'm ignoring her. It's a lose-lose. I try to ask how school is. She says it's school. I ask if she wants to hang out. She says, why would I? The truth is, I don't recognize her. But worse, I don't think she recognizes me. She acts like I've done something unforgivable. But I don't know what. I replay everything I say, every glance, every joke. Was it the way I corrected her in front of her friend? Was it the time I forgot to pick her up and was 20 minutes late? Was it me being tired? Short? Stressed? Mothers aren't supposed to make excuses. We're supposed to know. And I don't. Last week, she looked at me across the dinner table like I was a stranger. And that night, while cleaning up the kitchen, I cried. Not loud. Just quietly. The kind of cry you don't want anyone to hear. The kind where you don't even know what you're grieving, just that something's been lost. But the worst part came later. I went to throw away a stack of old papers and found one with her handwriting on it. I didn't mean to read it. But one sentence stopped me cold. I hate her. Not because she's cruel. But because she doesn't even see it. I folded the paper. Put it back. Didn't sleep all night. Because now I know it's real. She hates me. And the worst part? I still don't know why. I tried the next morning to act like nothing had changed. That sentence, the one I found in her handwriting, was still echoing inside my chest, but I smiled anyway. Poured cereal. Laid out her vitamins. Asked if she needed a ride. She said no. Didn't look up. Just grabbed her bag and walked out the door. I stood there at the kitchen counter with a half-filled glass of orange juice in my hand, wondering how you can live in the same house with someone and feel like a stranger renting a room. Later, I pulled out the old photo albums. Not because I wanted to reminisce, but because I needed to remind myself we were okay once. More than okay. I flipped through birthdays with frosting on noses. Bath time giggles. Tiny ballet shoes. I stopped at a photo of her at 7, laughing, hair tangled, finger in her mouth, looking straight at me behind the camera. I started to cry. Not from nostalgia. From guilt. Because she remembered a version of me that I don't think exists anymore. The one who had patience. Who said yes more than no. Who colored with her on the floor even when the dishes weren't done. I don't remember when I stopped being her soft place. Maybe it was after her father left. Or maybe it was after I stopped pretending he didn't break something in me when he did. Maybe it's the way I say, I'm fine, every time she asks what's wrong, the same way my mother used to do, right before going silent for days. I don't scream. I don't throw things. But I shut down. And now I wonder if that silence felt like punishment to her. I found something tucked in the back of the album. A folded piece of yellow paper, the kind from elementary school. It was a Mother's Day note she wrote me in 2nd grade. My mom is funny and nice. She makes good eggs and she lets me help even if I mess up. I love her because she always listens. I wiped my eyes slowly. Because now she won't even speak. It hit me, how we keep artifacts of who we used to be, but not warnings for who we become. I wanted to ask her. Do you remember that? Do you remember me? But I didn't ask. Because I was afraid of the answer. That afternoon, I made dinner early, something simple, something she used to love. She came into the kitchen, sniffed, and said, "We're not 5 anymore, Mom." She sat on the couch scrolling, barely touching her plate. When I asked about school, she mumbled. When I asked about her friends, she said they're fine. She used to tell me everything. Now every answer feels like a wall with no door. Later that night, I sat on the floor with the album in my lap. I kept flipping pages. Then I found one photo, a blurry shot from the back porch. Me holding her when she was maybe 3. But in the background, slightly out of focus, was him. Her father. The photo must have been misfiled. I'd erased most of them years ago. And yet there he was in the background. Watching. I stared at it for a long time. Not at him. At me. Because the woman in that photo was smiling, but her eyes were tired. Pulled tight. I remembered that day. He had yelled at me for something small. Then vanished for hours while I pretended everything was fine. I'd scooped her up to distract both of us. She doesn't remember the yelling. But maybe she remembers the silence after. Maybe the thing I thought I was protecting her from still found its way through. And now, all these years later, maybe she blames me not for what I did, but for what I let happen. It was the school that called me. Not because anything serious had happened, at least that's what the office said. Just a request to come in for a quick chat with her counselor. I assumed it was grades. Maybe attendance. Something normal. But when I walked into that small beige room, I knew it wasn't about homework. Her counselor, Ms. Allen, was young, composed, soft-spoken. The kind of person who could tell you your house was on fire and still make it sound like a suggestion. She asked me how things were at home. I said fine. I always say fine. She nodded slowly, looked at something on her tablet, then said, "Your daughter mentioned a recurring feeling of emotional neglect." The words didn't register at first. I blinked. "I'm sorry." She looked up. Her expression was careful, like someone handling thin glass. "She says she doesn't feel safe talking at home. Not unsafe physically, but that she's invisible." I wanted to defend myself. To explain. To say how much I try. How much I care. But I stayed quiet. Because a tiny voice inside me, the one I usually silence, whispered, "What if she's right?" Then Miss Allen said something that froze the air in the room. She mentioned an incident when she was younger. Something about being locked outside. Everything stopped. I knew what she was talking about. It was winter. She was 6. Her dad and I had been fighting, not screaming, just that sharp, hissing kind of fight where everything feels cold. He stormed out. Slammed the front door so hard it knocked a picture off the wall. She had followed him out in her socks. I hadn't noticed. Maybe for 5 minutes. Maybe less. By the time I realized she was gone, she was already curled on the steps, shivering, crying, holding her stuffed elephant. I had pulled her in, wrapped her in a blanket, told her everything was fine. I never told anyone else. I told myself she forgot. But she hadn't. She told her school counselor. 9 years later. Because that was the moment it all changed, not for me but for her. I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. There's something worse than tears, the weight of seeing yourself through someone else's fear. When I got home, she was in her room, as usual. I stood outside her door for a long time. My hand hovered over the knob. Then I knocked. No answer. I left a note instead. I remember the porch. "I didn't know you did too. I'm sorry. I see you. I really do." I slid it under the door. Hours passed. Dinner time came and went. I sat at the table, staring at my phone, not sure what I was waiting for. Then footsteps. She came into the kitchen. Didn't speak. Just opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, and sat down across from me. We sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes. And then she said, without looking up, "You always say sorry like it's a period. But it's not. It's supposed to be a beginning." She left the room. But that one sentence broke me in a way that felt honest. Because for the first time I realized I haven't been apologizing for her. I've been apologizing for my guilt. And there's a difference. The day after she said it, that sorry should be a beginning, I found myself standing in front of a mirror, studying the lines on my face. There's something cruel about how motherhood ages you in places no one sees. Under the skin. Behind the eyes. In the way you breathe slower when someone says your name, just to prepare for judgment. I looked at myself for a long time. And for the first time I didn't just see me. I saw her. My mother. Not in the bone structure. But in the quiet. That hard, stony quiet she wrapped around herself like armor. I grew up in a house of unspoken things. Where doors close softly but with finality. Where, "I'm fine" meant, "Don't ask again." Where crying was for bathrooms and behind closet doors. My mother never yelled. She corrected. She sighed. She punished with coolness and disappointed glances, the kind that made your skin burn. I remember once when I was 15 I stayed out an hour past curfew. I came home ready to lie. Ready to defend. But she didn't even look at me. Just poured herself tea. Sat on the couch. And said nothing. I stood in that doorway for 10 minutes, waiting for her to shout. She didn't. That silence followed me for years. And now I see it standing behind my daughter, like a ghost from a life she never lived but somehow inherited. I called my mother that afternoon. We hadn't talked in a few weeks. Nothing dramatic, just the usual drifting apart. She picked up on the third ring. Said hello like I'd just left the room. I asked her, "Did you know you were cold with me?" Silence. Then a sip of something. Probably tea. Finally, she said, "I gave you a better childhood than I had." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's the thing about pain passed down through generations. Each woman thinks she's doing better than the last. And maybe she is. But the wound doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. I wanted to say more, but I didn't. I wasn't calling to change her. I was calling to see her, to finally trace the thread backward and understand where mine began to unravel. That night, I sat on the edge of my daughter's bed while she scrolled on her phone. She didn't look at me. I didn't ask for permission to speak. I just said quietly, "You're right. I learned silence from my mom. I didn't realize I passed it to you." Still no eye contact. But her fingers stopped moving. I kept going. I thought if I kept things calm it meant safe. But now I know calm can also mean don't come closer. And I'm sorry for all the times I shut you out and made you think that was love. She didn't respond. Didn't tell me it was okay. But she didn't leave. And that for now felt like enough. The school called again. Only this time it wasn't the counselor. It was the nurse. Apparently, my daughter had locked herself in the bathroom during third period and refused to come out. They'd coaxed her out eventually, said she was pale and trembling, but not hurt. They told me it might be anxiety. I drove there with my stomach twisted into a knot I couldn't untie. When I arrived, she was sitting in the nurse's office chair, knees tucked up, arms wrapped around them like scaffolding. She didn't look at me when I walked in. The nurse gave me a gentle smile and stepped out. I stood there for a moment, not knowing whether to kneel, reach for her, or just sit silently. I chose the floor. I sank down beside her, crossed my legs, rested my hands in my lap. No questions. No small talk. We sat like that for almost 5 minutes. Then I whispered, "You don't have to talk. But I'm here. I'm not leaving." Her chin trembled first. Then the sound came, not a sob, not a wail. Just a breath that collapsed on itself. And then another. Her body folded inward like something had cracked from the inside, and she buried her face in her knees. I didn't touch her. I just let her fall apart. Because maybe that's all she ever needed, space to break without being told to fix herself quickly. Eventually she spoke. Not in full sentences, in fragments. Like pieces of glass she was handing me, one at a time. I didn't want to go back to school that day. "When Dad left, you didn't even look at me for 2 weeks. Everyone thinks I'm strong, but I'm tired all the time. Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming in a locked room." I nodded through every jagged word. My throat burned with shame. With love. With grief. Because I had missed all of this. Not because I didn't care, but because I thought I was showing care the way she needed. And I was wrong. I took her home early. She didn't speak in the car. But she didn't put on her headphones either. That evening, she came into the kitchen while I was cutting vegetables and leaned against the counter. I didn't push. She just said, "I'm scared a lot. And I don't know how to say it without feeling weak." I turned to her slowly. Not crying. Not overwhelmed. Just quiet. And said, "I'm scared a lot too." She didn't respond. But her shoulders dropped. A tiny bit. That night, we ate dinner in silence. Not the kind that divides, the kind that gently begins to mend. Later, I found a note on my pillow in her handwriting. "Thank you for sitting with me." That was all. But it was everything. Because the wall hadn't shattered, but a crack had finally let in light. The next morning, I didn't wake her for school. I stood at her door for a moment, holding the doorknob like it might bite. Then I knocked and said softly, "You're not going today. We're leaving." Her voice was groggy. "Where?" "Somewhere that doesn't care what your GPA is." She didn't answer right away. I heard the rustle of blankets, the hesitation that had become part of her body language. Eventually she asked, "Do I have to talk?" "No," I said. "Just pack something warm." I didn't plan it in advance. I just drove. Somewhere past the edge of our usual streets where houses gave way to trees and billboards thinned out. We stopped at a lake I remembered from my own childhood, wide, quiet, mostly empty in late fall. It smelled like pine and cold water and old wood. We didn't talk much. She sat on a bench with her hoodie up, earbuds out but unused. I walked along the edge of the water, letting the wind bite my cheeks. Later we got French fries from a food truck parked near the trail entrance. They were oversalted and half cold. I dropped one and cursed under my breath. She smirked. Not a laugh. Not yet. But something shifted. We ate in the car with the windows cracked and music playing softly. Songs I didn't recognize. But I didn't ask her to change them. Then, completely by accident, a bee flew in through the window and she screamed. The kind of high startled sound I hadn't heard since she was small. I tried to sweat it, missed, hit my cup, spilled soda across both our laps and gasped. Great! Now we're sticky and hunted. She burst out laughing. A real laugh. Loud. From the gut. Unfiltered. I stared at her like I was seeing a shooting star I didn't want to scare away. Then I started laughing too. Because we were both sticky and ridiculous and slightly cold, and for the first time in what felt like years we weren't holding anything in. That night, when we got home, she didn't disappear into her room right away. She sat at the kitchen table while I reheated soup. Looked at her phone, then at me. You weren't always so distant, she said. I remember you being softer. I turned the burner down and nodded. I remember her too. No one apologized. There was no speech. Just the sound of soup bubbling, and two people trying finally to meet in the middle. Life didn't change overnight. She still rolled her eyes sometimes. Still said, I'm fine, when I knew she wasn't. But there was something new now. A pause. A moment where before there would have been only a wall. She started eating in the kitchen again. Started sitting on the couch while I folded laundry, her legs tucked under her, scrolling on her phone, but there. Some nights she even told me things. Little things. Someone got detention. A teacher was annoying. A boy said something weird in math class. Not the big stuff. But it was a beginning. And beginnings are rare. They're worth everything. One afternoon I cleaned out the drawer by the microwave. The one filled with old pens that didn't work and coupons from 2 years ago. And I found the note she'd written years ago. The one from 2nd grade. I love my mom because she listens. I sat down at the table and cried. Not from guilt this time. From hope. That night, after she went to bed, I wrote her a letter. Not typed. Not sent by text. Written by hand in my most careful script, like when she was little and I used to write notes for her lunchbox. I didn't try to explain everything. I didn't list all the ways I'd failed or all the reasons why I didn't know better. I just told her what I knew now. You didn't owe me forgiveness. You didn't owe me anything. But you gave me a second chance. And I'm going to spend the rest of our life proving you were right to. I see you now. Not the version I wanted to raise. The one who's real. And strong. And hurt. And brave. And mine. If you ever forget who you are, I'll remind you. If you ever feel lost again, I'll come find you. Not as a perfect mom. But as someone who won't disappear this time. I folded it. Slipped it under her bedroom door. She never mentioned it the next day. Or the day after. But a week later, when I went to make her bed, I found it tucked in her nightstand drawer. Edges slightly bent. Still folded. Not thrown away. And that was enough. If you're a mother who's lost her daughter's voice, or a daughter who's tired of screaming into silence, start small. Don't demand. Don't defend. Just stay. Sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with someone who finally stops leaving the room.